Up next is Kevin Ko, who is an open source community engineer at Prefect, an open source workflow orchestration management system. Workflow orchestration frameworks are specifically designed to reduce the effort spent on negative engineering by enabling the scheduling and monitoring of workflows. Kevin will cover basic workflow orchestration functionality, and will familiarize ourselves with the features that let us handle these problems gracefully. Thanks for joining. Take it away, Kevin.
Hi everyone, my name is Kevin Ko. I am an open source community engineer at Prefect. Prefect is a workflow orchestration framework based on Python. So today we'll be going over the basics of workflow orchestration and how to deploy workflows using Prefect. So a bit about me. I mentioned my title is open source community engineer, but a bit more about what I do. So 80% of my job is helping our Slack community members use Prefect. So we have people deploying it on AWS or Kubernetes, Docker, maybe even locally. My job is to help them use Prefect and answer their questions. And then the other 20% of my job is appearing at meetups like this, or conferences like this or meetups. Happy to speak anywhere about Prefect or workflow orchestration in general. Prior to joining Prefect, I was a data scientist for 4 years, and I found myself moving further and further back in the stack. So I started as a data scientist doing machine learning, and eventually I became more responsible for the actual deployment of pipelines and then scheduling that. And then that's how I became familiar with the space of workflow orchestration. And then I ended up joining Prefect. Outside of my day job, I have another open source project called Fugue that I contribute to. So Fugue is a abstraction layer for Spark and for Panda, Spark, and Dask. So you can prototype your code locally on one machine and then deploy it out to Spark or Dask just by changing the engine. And then I am also the organizer of the Orlando Machine Learning Meetup. So today what we're going to do is we're going to start with workflow orchestration, the use case, get a feel if you're not familiar for what it does for you, and we'll talk about the history of Prefect a bit. And then we'll go over a simple problem interactively together, go over some code, see how we can deploy that to Prefect. And then we will actually put that on a schedule, and we'll talk about how you'd actually bring that to deployment. And then the last thing we're going to do is just some notes about the future of Prefect if there's enough time. So with that, let's get started with workflow orchestration. Workflow orchestration is pretty self-explanatory to some extent. You kind of already have a feel for what workflow orchestration is. Basically, we're just tracking if you have a pipeline that runs every so often, we're just tracking the upstream and downstream dependencies of that, and triggering them whenever it's the right time to, or whenever, or maybe we don't trigger them if the upstream task failed. So workflow orchestration is about managing the state of interconnected components in a pipeline. So let's take a look at this basic pipeline. We have a machine learning pipeline, and there's just a few moving pieces here. We get data from a database that gets written out into a Parquet file or any flat file, CSV or something. And we're combining that with API data into a pandas data frame. Then maybe we do some machine learning on that. And while we're doing the machine learning, we persist some artifacts to MLflow. What were the important metrics associated with our machine learning model? And then if maybe it passes some criteria, we want to deploy it, make our own API around that model. And if we look at this pipeline, there's many really all of these arrows are really interconnected steps. But what we want to take note of is what happens to this pandas data frame if this API goes down. API calls intermittently go down. Sometimes we get rate limited. What happens then to this data frame? What happens if this database is somehow on maintenance or the compute of it goes down? How do we get our flat file? So what we want to do is to manage the downstream dependencies and make sure that they don't trigger, or maybe they can, if not fail, maybe they can retry, or maybe they just fail gracefully. And we want to fail gracefully in a general sense. A lot of times failure happens from stuff we don't even expect or we don't even know could occur. And in those cases, what we want to do is just to make sure that whatever happened, we get some level of observability into it, and that it's handled gracefully. So when we look at the potential points of failure, you might be thinking, well, why don't, hey, if the API fails, why don't I just retry? Hey, the database fails, why don't I just schedule later? My something data comes in malform, maybe I should have just written checks. But the point is that the more and more you safeguard against failure, that means that you're writing more code to explicitly handle failure. And when we talk about like interconnected pipelines where there's a lot, the failure cases are a lot more complex. Like for example, we have this top half, which is a business intelligence pipeline, and the bottom half is our previous machine learning pipeline, and maybe they share some common data dependency. When we talk about interconnected pipelines, the surface area of which they can fail exponentially increases. And then your failure logic becomes all the more complicated. And that failure logic, when you guard against failure, that's what we refer to as negative engineering in Prefect. When we talk about positive engineering, we're talking about the things that you set out to do, when the things that you are explicitly hired to do, right? You are like as a data scientist, your job is to build models. Your job is to generate some business insight, uh, drive revenue. And when we talk about negative engineering, we're talking about the defensive side of things, the engineering the code that we write in order to just keep our system alive and make sure that it's running, right? And the more and more you try to guard against these scenarios, the more that you'll find that a lot of time is actually indeed spent on negative engineering. So when Prefect was founded 3 years ago, there was this common saying that data scientists, they really only spend 10% of their job modeling, right? And what is that 90% of engineering time spent on? That 90% is on negative engineering. So in Prefect, what we want to do is to eliminate negative engineering. If we can bring this 90% down to 80% or 70%, in effect, we can double or triple developer productivity. And we want to be able to provide a framework that lets you in a few lines of code add these functionality to your pipelines. And that's where Prefect comes in. So Prefect is both the company and the open source project. We currently have 8,700 GitHub stars. Our Slack community still continues to grow, nearing 16,000 right now. As I mentioned, my job is the Slack community. So if you want to just come in, ask questions about workflow orchestration, always feel free to jump in there and just chat. And when we talk Prefect is a Python-based workflow orchestration system tool, but more importantly, it's designed on the modern data stack and has a native Dask integration. So Dask is a distributed compute framework, and Dask is and now we also have array integration as well. These distributed compute frameworks allow us to scale our pipelines to multiple machines, right, and run tasks on multiple machines, and then collect and track the state of those tasks across the workers on the cluster. So previously we had Prefect 1.0, and 1.0 was paired with Prefect Cloud or Prefect Server. But then very recently, around 6 months ago, we announced Prefect 2.0, and very recently, like last month, we released the Cloud 2.0 as well. So Cloud 2.0 is currently in beta. Prefect 2.0 is already out there, and everything we'll be talking about today is in Prefect 2.0. 2.0 is kind of in beta. There are still some rough edges, but if you need something productionizable today, then definitely look at 1.0. But 2.0 is already capable of handling some workloads. Just if you need something really production ready, then go for 1.0. So we'll be talking about 2.0 today. And Orion is the name of 2.0. Core is the name of 1.0. So if ever I say Orion, we're just referring to 2.0 today. Here is the basic hello world of Prefect 2.0. So here we just define a task that is just basic Python code. So if you just ignore the task decorator, this is just normal Python code over here, just a function. And then we call the function inside this other function where we say for repo and repos, get the stars. And then we can just pass a list of repos and we can just call this. So the only prefect dependency here is this task line and this flow line. By wrapping them in the task and flow semantics, we bring them into the world of workflow orchestration. I'll go a bit more into what these actually provide later on. But note, what I want to show you is how easy it is to do these like negative engineering things, right? Where you can just say, hey, I want like 3 retries on this task, and then this is an API call. So if it intermittently fails, it will just retry up to a maximum of 3 times. We want to make this as the goal of Orion was making something as Pythonic as ever. I mean, the previous 1.0 was very Pythonic already, but still there were some stuff that you would need to learn to use it. 2.0 is a lot more Pythonic. Like for example, we have a for inside this flow, and then 1.0 that wasn't allowed. So with that, we're going to work on a simple example together. I am going to change screen here, and what we're going to do is to get, this is a specific shoe that I'm interested in, and what we want to do is to check this price every day. And if the price goes on discount and it's below my budget, then I want to be alerted of that, right? So the important thing is we load this page, we get this price, and then we have some logic that will handle comparing that and sending the notification. So if I go to my code editor here, what I'm going to do is the important thing first for now, I'm going to remove this. The important thing for now is that I have this function, find Nike price. This takes in a URL. And this, if you're not familiar with Beautiful Soup, the important thing is we parse this page and we get the price. And then we do some formatting to remove spaces and this $sign over here, and then we get it as an integer. So I should be able to show you what this looks like if I do find Nike price over here, and I pass in the URL. And oops, this is fine. And now I can run this. Actually, sorry, I should have printed it. And we should see that this function returns 150. Okay, perfect, 150, which is the price here. So now we can just focus on this other code. So the next part is when I make a price comparison. So I have the price from my previous step, the 150, and I want to check if it's below my budget. If it is equal to the budget or below, we say buy the shoes. Otherwise, we say don't buy the shoes. And now in my Nike flow over here, I can take in a URL and a budget. And at the bottom here, all I have to do is say Nike flow, URL, and budget. And then I can run this, and I think this is misaligned actually. There we go. Oh, okay, so that worked. We got the message, don't buy the shoes, because our budget was 120. So we have a basic flow like this. And the next question is like, how do we, like, let's say I want to track this every day. How do I actually do that? And without any knowledge of workflow orchestration, what we're going to do is just say while true, like an infinite loop, and then we can say Nike flow, and then we can just wrap it like time.sleep, and then like seconds in a day. So like 24 times 60 times 60. And you say, hey, just run this Nike flow every day, and we just leave it at that. But going back to negative engineering, what are the things that can go wrong here, right? This is an API call. What happens if the page doesn't load? That's the main thing we're concerned about. If this page somehow doesn't load, my program just ends with it'll just error out, right? So what we want to do is to be more robust around that. What we're gonna do first to show you is this flow decorator. So this flow decorator is telling Prefect, hey, monitor the state of this, track the state of this workflow. We're not going to change any of these yet. What we're just concerned about is this flow. And I'm going to call it, I'm not changing the way I call it. It's just like a normal Python function still. So I'm going to call Nike flow. And we should see some form of change, some change in the logs here. Note how there was logging around our flow now, right? So we created this merciful softfly flow run, and it finished its state. It printed the "don't buy the shoes, they're too expensive," and then it said, "Hey, this thing is done." So it looks pretty normal right now, but actually under the hood, what we're doing is we're tracking the state of this flow. So if I do prefect Orion start over here, prefect ships with a UI and the API. So we hit the API under the hood. Even though it wasn't spun up, there's an ephemeral API that we can hit, and then it persists the data in a SQLite table. And now we can go check the dashboard over here. So I'm gonna just open the dashboard and show you guys what that looks like. And you should see that there is this green bar here. It says there's a completed flow run. And over here, we have this merciful soft lie. So if you remember our Nike flow, we hit this, we made a new flow run called merciful soft lie, generated randomly. And now we can see it here. And we can see the logs associated with that. But of course, if we want to add more observability into this, what we need to do, I'm going to stop this first. What we need to do is wrap these guys into tasks. So all I'm going to do here is say task and task. And now I'm going to run this again. Oh, sorry, not the server, the flow. And then here we have a diligent toady. And now we can do our Orion start again. And we have, I'm going back to the UI here. We should see another flow run, diligent toady. And that's the run that just happened. Now there's going to be something a bit different here. One, we actually had task run logs because we wrap those as tasks. So the task is an opt-in way to tell Prefect to track the state of that thing, but not everything needs to be a task, right? Only the things that explicitly need to be monitored or maybe retried or need some kind of handling to them, which Prefect can handle. The next thing I want to point out is this radar plot, right? This find Nike price was our first task, and this compare price was our second task. The radar plot is a visualization of your flow run. So this line between them means that this was the upstream of this, and it passed some data between these two tasks, right? So if you look over here, this task ran, and the output was stored in this price, and this price was passed over here. This is not present in all workflow orchestration frameworks. Prefect intentionally designed it to be lightweight, such that you can pass data natively as if it were just basic Python. So the important piece here is that you don't need any like intermediate persistence. Hey, I'm going to save this file here, and then a downstream task will load it. No, you can just pass data between immediately. Something that isn't shown here though is what like this visualization is a bit plain right now because we only have one set of tasks. So in order to add more stuff here, what I'm gonna do is just add more tasks on the flow side. I'm gonna open this server in another terminal so that we don't have to keep opening it anymore. Okay, and this should be good. I'll just move it away. So now over here we had this the most basic thing I'm gonna do is just change the compare price. Like let's just say this is 130, let's just say 140, and let's pretend that this URL is like some other shoes that I'm concerned about. Now what I can do is I can just run this again, and all of these are now new tasks that are going to, I'll just say price 1 just for some distinction, and then price 2 and price 3. And now I can rerun the same thing. And then I will go to my terminal, to my Orion URL. So this I just want to point out this dashboard is hosted locally. Like the server is on, but it's like all running on local infrastructure. I didn't have to install anything extra. This comes with the Prefect installation. I just need to do Prefect Orion start, one command, and it works off the shelf. Now we have our latest flow run, and notice this one has more task runs now. And if I go here, you're gonna see that the inner ring holds the first level task, the find price task, and then the second outer ring holds the comparison. And then I can like hover over this to find that, oh, this was the data dependency. Let's find an easier one, this one. And then this is linked because this passed the data downstream, right? So right now we've only discussed failure, success, flow successes. So the next thing to see is what happens if a flow fails. And Prefect has a really nice way to make things has an interesting feature in 2.0 that wasn't around in 1.0, and that's the validation of these parameters. So because this is a flow, these are the parameters associated with our flow. They are normal Python type hints, but Prefect will actually use them to coerce the data type of the parameter that you passed. And if it can't be coerced, then Prefect will error out immediately before any of this computation begins, right? Which is really useful. What happens a lot is like if you have some expensive infrastructure, like you're using a DAS cluster, for example, you don't have to go through that if the parameter validation fails off the bat. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna remove this. We don't need that anymore. This should actually be budget. And what I'm gonna do is over here, this is the parameter. I'm just gonna change this to a string instead. And the string will try to be converted to this budget, an integer, but it will fail. So let's see what happens. Okay, so we got this message. Hey, the flow run inventive shark received invalid parameters and it marked it as failed. So we were able to stop this run from even happening. And now that we have a failed flow run, we can look at what it looks like in the UI. So again, I will navigate to the UI and I should see this failed flow run. And what's nice about the Prefect UI in 2.0 is that you can actually customize and make your own dashboard depending on what you want to see, right? So here I have the filters tab, and maybe I want to add a filter for flow runs that failed specifically. And now I only see one flow run, and this is also filtered down here. So I can now filter to that inventive shark flow run, and I don't see all the others. So you can see runs depending on their state. Maybe if you have a couple of flows here, you want to filter for a given flow, or maybe deployments which we haven't covered yet, you can isolate some certain deployments that you're interested in, create the necessary filters for those, or even time frame. Do you want to see 1 week in the future, 1 day in the future? The default here is 1 day past and 1 day in the future. And then you can also you can save this this search and create new filters like that. And by doing that, you can have your own custom dashboards that you're interested in, which Prefect 1 did not give this functionality. Didn't really provide any customizable functionality, honestly. So now we open this, and you can type these in yourself as well. These are like completed. So this is very much way more flexible, and this is the direction that Prefect 2 is going to move forward in. So we have this failed flow, and you should just see this did. I mean, this is the one that did not start just because the parameter validation failed. So we can just go to the flow run page. We don't see any logs because it didn't even start. And with that, we'll go back to Prefect and look at some other features. So the next thing I want to discuss is, okay, how do I actually deploy this now that I have a flow? And the answer is through what is called a deployment. And this is how you schedule stuff every day, right? So we will take this out, this call out first. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna copy this code. This is just straight up from the documentation. What you need to know is that we're making this deployment spec, and then there's this interval schedule, and the interval schedule takes the time delta. So we can say, hey, run this every day or run this every 1 minute. For now, I'm gonna say 5 minutes just so we see what it looks like in the UI. Tags, everything is tagged in Prefect 2.0. So if you want to associate this certain deployment with certain infrastructure, like maybe dev staging prod, you can tag it appropriately so that only the infrastructure that's also tagged dev can pick it up, or the infrastructure that's only tagged as prod can pick it up. So we're gonna pass our Nike flow into this deployment spec, give it a name, and then we want to register this. I'm gonna remove this. Actually, I should just specify that as a parameters. So URL, and then give this, and then the same thing with the budget. And these are the default parameters for this deployment. Just change this. And then comma. And then now instead of running the Python script, I want to register this deployment. So what the command for it is prefect deployment create and then showflow.py. And I should see this in oops, I have a typo here. And I should see a new deployment is created over here using local storage. So it's saving a file locally that's going to be used for the deployment. And now I can also inspect this to see what it looks like, but we're going to view it in the UI. So the important part about this inspection is you see the default parameters, you see the schedule, the given flow ID, the name. But what we're interested in is seeing it in the UI. So I'm going to navigate back to the UI, and I'm going to refresh here, and you should see this deployment. And this deployment is the one I just registered, right? So if I go here, it shows me, oh, it saved the file locally here in the storage. And when it's going to run, it's going to fetch that file and then execute it. This scheduled here is the, by default, Prefect will schedule the next 100 flow runs of your deployment. And then over here, we have our scheduled flow in yellow. But that's nearly there. The last thing we have to do to get these working is to make a work queue and an agent. So the work queue is the mechanism. A work queue can pick up a certain subset of runs. So I mentioned a while ago that we can have tags, and then tags can pick up. Tags can be labeled as dev, staging, or prod. So you can make a work queue that's associated with all of the deployments tagged as dev, or all of the deployments tagged as prod, or all of the deployments, maybe you want like, hey, these runs need a GPU specifically for some model training. What we're going to do is we can tag that deployment as a GPU, and we can create the work queue for the GPU runs such that only that work queue will pick up those flow runs scheduled. But for now, I'm not going to add any filters or anything like that. So the default work queue can pick up everything, and I'm going to make a default work queue. And it gives me this command, and it says this is how you can start an agent. So I'm going to start an agent. And if you're not familiar with Prefect 1 or Prefect 2, the important thing is that the agent lives on the infrastructure where you want the work to execute. So here, or maybe like, for example, you have a Kubernetes cluster, you can have like a agent in that Kubernetes cluster that can then pick up the work and deploy it in that Kubernetes cluster. So the agent, and this is what Prefect calls the hybrid model, the agent sends requests to your Prefect server, or Orion server or Prefect Cloud, and it sends a request every in Prefect 1.0 at every 10 seconds, in 2.0 every 5 seconds, and it looks for flow runs to run. And if it picks something up, it will then deploy it, right? So here the important part is we spun up an agent, it saw there was a scheduled run, and then it completed the submission of that flow run, and then the sub process executed cleanly. So that's how you would run. Like, this is actually picking up those scheduled runs now and actually deploying them. And with that, we're going to go back to slides. I'll close this. So back to slides. So I showed how we were able to apply Prefect to a simple problem. And the other thing is I showed how we were able to create a deployment to schedule how to run our workflow every day or at some given interval. The last thing I want to mention is that So again, today I showed 2.0. The 2.0 docs can be found in oriondocs.prefect.io. And if you're interested to learn more about the motivation behind making 2.0, what were the constraints that we had in 1.0 that we had to make we had to build the framework again from ground up and make it more like lightweight and robust and flexible to handle emerging use cases, you can read this blog about announcing pre. I'm gonna about announcing Prefect Orion. And the last thing that I want to mention, of course, is that Prefect is hiring. We have a lot of positions that are open right now, even outside of engineering, maybe product management, marketing, technical writing. Like we have a lot of positions open. I want to highlight these engineering positions. We are looking for, in general, site reliability, security, infrastructure, solutions engineer, developer advocate, whatever you're interested in, feel free to reach out to me. My email is kevin@prefect.io. If you're interested in joining our Slack community, our Slack community is prefect.io/Slack, or you can go to prefect.community as well. You can see all of our community initiatives there. If you're interested in in either applying or you want to use Prefect, just feel free to reach out to me. Right now, Orion is open source entirely, Apache 2 license. You can use it for whatever purpose. The Cloud 2.0 beta is where we host the Orion service. So everything I showed you was on your infrastructure, but we can also host that for you. And that's what Cloud 2.0 is for. Cloud 2.0 can be found at beta.prefect.io. And with that, thank you everyone, and I hope you have a good conference.